In this video, we're going to talk about content ideas for communication. This video is essentially a sequel to one of my earlier videos called The Art of Following Up, which was really just about making sure that everything, all the correspondence that you have with a potential lead, a prospect, or a client is client-centric, so that rather than focusing on yourself and what you can offer, though that's important in terms of your voiceover offering essentially, and how fast your turnover time is, and where your expertise is to make sure that it's content that serves the particular problem areas that your clients may have, the importance and the value of this. But I just wanted to kind of add that because a lot of people still kind of seem to hit that wall of, I don't know what to be following up with. You reach out with that initial cold call or that initial email or that DM maybe, and maybe you find something really impressive about your potential leads work that you can reference to show that you're engaged, and then you offer your services, and as long as you frame that as an offering of a resource as opposed to have you got a job for me, please hire me, I need the money to pay my mortgage, so you don't come across as desperate, that's an essential first step. But with the follow-ups, lots of people just kind of get stumped, and it's so integral to be able to continue to follow up. First of all, we've got to acknowledge perfection paralysis, again, another thing that I've talked about previously, which is just because you might not have all of your ducks in the row and perfectly polished, to murder the metaphor, doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be doing it. In terms of follow-up ideas, the most basic follow-up ideas that you have, if you're following up to someone who hasn't responded to you, is your portfolio of work. Whether or not that's your demos, individual tracks on those demos, or ideally bits of your work in different genres, showing different aspects of your vocal performance, as long as they're still relevant to the person that you're reaching out to. There's no point in sending a sample of an audiobook to someone who only deals in promo reads, essentially. But still, the principle is, if you've got five different demos, or ideally 5 different visual portfolio pieces that you think are your best and differing in contrasts, then those can be your first 5-6 pieces of follow-up correspondence, so that you've got that as a kind of base level. Now, operating on the next level above that, I like to recommend that you've got this competing narrative of I'm never quite perfect enough in order to be able to reach out in the first place. Turn that problem into the solution, so that every time you do make an adjustment to something that you felt was less good, that you've improved upon, like a new demo, like some new branding, like a whole new website, like a whole new email signature, whatever, you can use that as a very light excuse to get back in contact. So if it is yes, my website has had a complete rebrand, or I've added in a testimonial section, or, I've recorded this new demo. This is, again, another thing that you can do to augment that initial kind of spine of follow-ups, which were to do with, the content and the work and the projects that you're creating with. Now you can augment that with certain improvements. And because you're dealing with people, you're reaching out to people who are creative, it's possible that you could ask their opinion on these things, from a visual aspect, for example. You could ask them, what did you think? And with all of this stuff, you're not asking with an expectation that they can give you, that they want to give you detailed kind of feedback. But it's about asking their professional opinion about stuff, which would be within their skill set, within their remit anyway, and creating a form of a dialogue in terms of around a personal brand, or around building a portfolio, or around building the testimonial section, from business owner to business owner. And then I think the third tier of this is really about thinking of things that have nothing to do with voiceover originally anyway. So all the other aspects of you, not to do with your job now, brainstorm them all. Because these are, again, aspects of you which are going to make you much more interesting and individual, funnily enough. And then think about how these different things might be able to provide insights into your work, which you could share either as a blog post or as video content or, as a post on social media, something like that. So, for example, if you have a previous job in an administration role or in a completely different artistic role, are there any of those kind of insights from your work there previously that you could now reflect on in terms of your day-to-day operations in voiceover that you would like to share, or dealing with clients, etc.? I made a video about theatre producing and what it taught me about running my own business. And quite a lot of people quite a lot of leads that follow up seem to respond to that, because it's showing a bit more about my life outside voiceover, that I'm not just purely thinking about voiceover and sealing the deal and booking those jobs and all of that kind of thing. There's a bit more to me as a person, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, is the producing of theatre work with a theatre company that I take a lot of pride in helping facilitate. So that kind of adds an extra different personal dimension, but you still make it relevant to the creative process, the process of production, to potentially similar pain points that your clients or your prospects or your leads might have. I think identifying what those potential pain points are, whether or not that's to do with time frame, whether or not that's to do with, the speed or negotiation of price with talent, you obviously try as best as possible to identify what all the potential problems might be for your prospective client, certainly in terms of dealing with voiceover and their day-to-day operations. And then it's seeing if you can find any shared ground. And obviously we default to discussing any shared ground in terms of our voiceover business, which is great, fine. But if there's any other experience, whether or not it's even like if you trained to a certain level in a sport and what that taught you about your work ethic, all of these different aspects can make you more memorable as a result. And ultimately, with all of these follow-up correspondences, it's not about being disingenuous, and it's not about the expectation that they'll immediately get back to you. It's just personalizing things, making things seem a bit more interesting. I went back in a previous video about saying how a lot of the grind is because we're not creating a lot of stuff. We're simply kind of reaching out in a more mechanical way, ultimately, if we're doing it to any kind of degree of scale. So all of these opportunities to provide personal insight, whether you put it in a blog, whether you put it in a social media post, whether you put it in an Instagram reel or a TikTok, whatever works for you. But again, that level of personalization would be, I'd say, the kind of like the third tier. So you start with your portfolio of work, then it's kind of the next level is your continual development as an artist and as a voiceover and as a business, so you can get that sense of journey and growth and be able to share that creative endeavor as well. And then the third aspect to that is the personal, is the outside of business aspect that you can kind of add into the conversation. If you've got those three, then you can kind of alternate and shape what your follow-up strategy is in a lot more of ways. And once you've kind of got it down, it's not something that you've got to completely reinvent every single time you follow up. You've still got that chain, and you can swap things in and out more organically depending on how you feel, depending on what level of responses a certain piece of content or a certain email gets. Anyway, I've tried not to overcomplicate things, probably have though, but I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much for joining me as ever. Please do like, subscribe, turn on notifications so that you don't miss any future content. Wishing you a great week, and I will see you next time.